Fire Emblem franchise is a series of tactical RPGs made by Intelligent Systems and published by Nintendo. Originally created by Shozo Kaga, the first game was released in 1990 for the Famicom system in Japan. In fact, until Super Smash Bros. Melee introduced Marth and Roy, the West had not had a single Fire Emblem game localized. Thankfully, the Super Smash Bros. Community was strong even back then, and Fire Emblem started to get some attention in the West. And then, in 2003, it finally happened. The 7th title was released outside of Japan for the first time. The official title is Fire Emblem: The Blazing Blade, but for many of us, the game box and cartridge simply read Fire Emblem. While Kaga did not work on this game, his influence is still very prevalent. This is my review of Fire Emblem 7: The Blazing Blade. As I said before, Fire Emblem 7: The Blazing Blade was released in 2003 for the Game Boy Advance. It was the first game in the series that was released outside of Japan, and the second title released for the GBA. As of 2022, every mainline Fire Emblem game has been a tactical RPG, which means every chapter has a map that is broken into blocks like a chessboard. The chapter plays out in turns: the player phase and the enemy phase. Rinse and repeat until the objective is met. In most cases, your goal is to defeat every enemy on the map, but sometimes you have to capture a throne, defend a certain location or character for a set number of turns, or even have all of your units escape to a certain point on the map. Fire Emblem is known for its difficulty and for permadeath. That's right, I said permadeath. If your unit dies in battle, they are dead for the rest of the game. Choose your moves carefully, or you'll have to restart the chapter from the beginning. Usually the first couple of chapters are pretty easy to get first-time players in the groove, but soon enough, the training wheels come off, and things get pretty dicey. From the sheer quantity of foes to defeat, and a wide variety of weapons, enemy reinforcements, and optional sub-objectives like collecting chests on the map. As you play through the levels with the characters of your choice, you will be gaining experience and leveling up. The levels, however, are somewhat random. Every character has the same number of stats: HP, strength, magic, speed, defense, etc. Each of these stats have a different percentage of increasing every level, which differs from character to character. So depending on how your characters level up, you could find yourself in trouble late game. The other thing to remember is the main character, which is usually a class called Lord. If your Lord dies, it is game over, and you have to restart the chapter. Protect your Lords. As with most of the Fire Emblem titles, they are very medieval inspired, with kings, queens, knights, and lords. Most of the games are standalone series that take place on different continents. The general consensus is that many of the Fire Emblem games take place in the same overall world, but at vastly different times in history. For now, we'll focus on just Fire Emblem 7, and perhaps get into general timelines in a future video. This game is actually a prequel to Fire Emblem 6: The Binding Blade. The Blazing Blade takes place on the continent of Elib? Elibi. Yeah, I like that one. 20 years before the event of the previous game. A long time ago, before the events of this game, humans and dragons lived together. Then for some reason, the humans turned against the dragons and went to war to banish all dragons from the land. This war is referred to as the Scouring. This is explained in the opening movie. From the title screen, you can select 3 different stories. The first is Lynn's story, which is basically the tutorial. Lynn lives in the plains of Sake, along with her tribe, which was murdered by bandits. That's a very common occurrence in all of these games. Someone should really do something about all those bandits. Anyway, Lynn meets you, the player, as a traveling tactician. I really like how they have you, the player, worked into the story because it allows the characters to talk directly to you, so you feel more involved in the story. We see this occur in several other future Fire Emblem games, when your created character is part of the story, but I digress. Lyn also meets a couple of knights that are convinced she is the granddaughter of their lord, and wants to bring Lyn to meet him before he passes away from illness. Without going into spoilers, you and Lyn travel across the countryside, fighting your way to Castle Caelin to confront her evil uncle, Lord Lundgren. After clearing Lyn's story, you play through Eliwood's story, which is the bulk of the game. Upon beating that, you unlock Hard Mode, as well as Hector's story. Hector's story has a few different chapters compared to Eliwood's, and it is a little harder as well. The ultimate challenge is Hector's Hard Mode, for those who like to torture themselves with challenges. I prefer to play for the story, but if you want a challenge, this should do it. One of the cool aspects of this game series is the support system, which started in Fire Emblem 6. Every character has several other characters they can build support with, which will boost certain stats depending on who those characters are. In the GBA games, after standing side by side for a certain number of turns, the character will have a conversation with each other that can range from humorous to filling out a character's backstory to help in understanding that character better. There are a ton of conversations in this game, so if you want to read them all, you'll have to replay this game a lot. Like, a lot. Or you can just look them up online. This is the part where I want to talk about all the characters and party members, but the roster for Fire Emblem games are often very, very large. Instead, I will just briefly highlight a number of units I used in my playthroughs, starting first with the Lords. First you have Lyn, who is a very fast swordswoman. Her strength growths can sometimes be on the lower side, but she does have a high critical hit chance and speed to kind of balance out. If you find any strength growth items, you might want to save them for her. Second, Eliwood is a swordsman who class changes into a mounted unit. You are forced to have him in play for most chapters if you play Eliwood's story instead of Hector's story, but his growth rates are all very average, so he usually is not great. Hector, on the other hand, is an axe wielder with armor. His defense is top-notch, and so is his attack stat. If you want a bulky axe guy, Hector is your man. Highlights for sword units are Guy, who starts as a Myrmidon and can become a Swordmaster. Swordmasters have a very high crit rate thanks to their innate class crit bonus. So if you love that critical hit sound, you will want him on your team. Like Lyn though, he may not get a lot of strength. Raven starts as a mercenary and can become a hero. Heroes can use swords and axes, so if you're lacking in axe users in your squad, look no further. Last is Matthew, who starts as a thief and can become an assassin. The assassin class is a little harder to obtain, but totally worth it with their high speed and a chance to one-hit KO any unit, regardless if the assassin does damage or not. You just need to have a chance to crit to get that one-hit KO. The Lance units are a bit tougher for me to highlight. I always recommend Oswin the Knight, who can become a general. Once he class changes, he is able to wield axes as well to pull double duty. A solid unit to go against most physical threats. As far as Cavaliers go, you get 3, Kent, Sane, and Lowen. All 3 of them vary from playthrough to playthrough, so I can't recommend any one of them specifically. You just have to start leveling them up and see how they turn out. For flying units, there are also 3 Pegasus Knights that can turn into Falco Knights, otherwise called Falcon Knights in other games, and 2 Wyvern Riders. They have great movement but are weak to arrows, so be careful. I tend not to use flying units much, so I don't have much to say about them. My local Fire Emblem expert Kestorf Alchemy, on the other hand, swears by flying units, especially when it comes to visiting villages, protecting NPC units, and rescuing others in a pinch. Axe units are even tougher in this game. I'm gonna double dip with Oswin the General. Bartra is a great fighter who can become a warrior, when he has good level ups. For me, he seems about 50-50 if he's usable or not. The last mention goes to Dart the Pirate, who can become a berserker with a similar innate class crit bonus as sword masters. He can walk on water and does crazy critical hit damage. But if you don't know where to look, you might never be able to promote Dart. His promotion item is sneakily hidden in the desert sands. Magic users are a bit easier to pick. Pent is a late game addition and a great sage unit that is already class changed when you get him. I almost never use pre-promoted units, but Pent has great growth rates and good base stats, and he is usually better than Urk, at least for me. Canis is the only shaman you get, and he can become a druid. Sadly, he is also hit and miss, but he usually turns out well for me. Dark magic books are the heaviest books in the game, so it can be hard to double attack with them if Canis gets some bad levels. Or worse, he will get double attacked by the enemy. Be careful. Last but not least, Priscilla is by far one of the best healers in the game, in my opinion. As a troubadour who can become a Valkyrie, she's a mounted unit, so her movement is a big plus. Her growth rates are surprisingly good for a healer, and she can shrug off those magic attacks easily with all that resistance she gets. And when she class changes, she can use anima magic. You just can't get any better than Priscilla. I almost forgot about archers. You get 3 throughout the game, but I recommend Rebecca over Will and Louise. Will is a strong, sturdy archer, but I would say that consistent double attacking is better. Besides, Will's better bulk doesn't seem to benefit since archers shouldn't be seeing melee combat anyway. Rebecca seems to have better growth rates, and you get her at level 1 early in Ellawood's story, so you have plenty of time to level her up. If you haven't leveled up Rebecca or Will, Louise is an okay option, but with her average growth rates and base stats, she's just okay. I have become a fan of the Fire Emblem series because of this game, so of course, I love this game. Is it the best game in the franchise? Probably not. I have not played all of them yet, but I'm sure there are others in the series that I might like more, objectively speaking. This was the game that started the Fire Emblem hype around the world. This was the game that made the world start asking the big questions about this series. Where is Marth? Where is Roy? Why is Roy called Ellawood in this game? You know, the big questions. I may have put this game high on the list due to nostalgia for playing it so much growing up, but there is a reason I started my YouTube channel with this game. It means a lot to me, and I wanted to give everyone a chance to experience this game, even if they cannot find a copy of it for themselves. I give this game a 4 out of 5. If you have an opportunity to pick this game up, do it. I don't think you'll regret it. The story is good, the character interactions feel very genuine, even though there is no voice acting in this game. The sprite work for the GBA game is incredible, and the music is a big highlight for me. I actually bought the soundtrack box set for Fire Emblem 6 and 7 from Japan when it released. I loved it that much. If you don't have the opportunity to pick the game up for yourself, feel free to check out our playthrough of the game on the channel. It is the very first playthrough we made, so it may be a little rough around the edges. But just like the Fire Emblem series debuting in the West, there is more to come in the future. I'm Turtle029. Thanks for watching RPG Treasure Trove. See you in the next episode. Take care. Bye-bye.